Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
There is so much to say about Jerry Cahill. I feel like everyone in the CF community knows who he is, so this introduction will be very short because, like they say, this person needs no introduction, and we go through his CF story in the podcast. So if there are things you don't remember about Jerry, you'll learn about them again. And if you want to meet him in person, I encourage you to attend our Night of Hope Gala on September 9th. That's a Saturday. You'll be able to talk with Jerry about anything that is on your heart, and you'll be so inspired, like I am, every single time I see him and get to talk to him. He is just a beautiful light in this CF community. It's always good to see you, Jerry Cahill. I was thinking back when I first met you, the first time you came to an education day for my foundation when my foundation was a baby. And I was like, oh my gosh, Jerry Cahill's coming. Like, you have been so good to me and my foundation. I can never thank you enough. You just were like, yeah, we were so new, and still you came and talked, and all those people that met you for the first time have never forgotten you. All those people in my community that don't have a direct link to CF have never forgotten you. And then you did your movie, and people saw that here, and you came in for that. And some of my cousins were blown away.
Wow.
CF was never explained to them so clearly, they said. And that's when I changed how I did things, because I thought I'm not telling the story enough. So thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's great to see you again. And I look forward to a Night of Hope. Should be exciting.
I know. I can't wait. And actually, this podcast is airing just 4 days before our event. So it's only days away.
Yeah, it's an exciting event, and especially now, it's exciting times. I mean, you know, your theme, Night of Hope and Diamonds in the Sky. I mean, with, you know, what's going on within the CF community with the life expectancy, 56. I mean, it's amazing how far the world of cystic fibrosis has come, and celebrating all of that and what you've done at Night of Hope will be really great.
And what was the life expectancy when you were born 66 years ago?
Oh, God. When I was diagnosed a little later at age 10 because I grew up in the dark ages. You know, back then, before that, you know, I had asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, and allergies. So they didn't really know. And when I went in the hospital, did a sweat test, it came back as kind of a positive, negative. They did it again, turned out positive, but that was age 10, but that was the dark ages. I mean, I remember, you know, the therapies when my enzymes were a little powder that had a mix in like juice or applesauce, and my nebulizer was a little DeVilbiss handheld bulb. And, you know, I would put Mucomist in it and push the bulb and take a deep breath in. I mean, it was archaic, but yeah, I mean, it was quite different back then. And the technology with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and all the pharmaceutical companies, we've come a long way, baby, that's for sure. And, you know, the life expectancy back then, they told me it's 15. They told my parents, you know, just keep Jerry comfortable at home. And yeah, that's basically it. You know, he won't be around very long. So, but my parents got me involved, my dad in particular, playing sports with my brothers. And, you know, that changed the scope of CF for me. I just never thought about CF then. I just thought, you know, I was an athlete. I wasn't very good, you know, but I played baseball, football, basketball. And, you know, back then, all that exercise was probably the single most important thing that kept me healthy, is just keeping my lungs clear through exercise.
Did you realize it then that it was exercise, or did your parents back at that time?
No, really what happened is, the story goes like, my dad just said, well, my mom wanted to put me in a bubble, just keep me at home, and that's it. And my 3 older brothers were very athletic and played football, baseball. And my dad's thought was, well, if Jerry's not going to be around very long, he wanted me to spend the time with my brothers. And what my brothers did is play sports. So growing up, like if it started with baseball, if I should have been on the little Pee-wee league or the Bantam league, my brothers were on the minors, the majors. So he spoke to the coach and they were good players. They put me on the team with them. So I would be with my brothers. They would watch me, take care of me. But I hated it. I got hit in the eye with the baseball, ended up in the emergency room. And that was my bout with baseball. And then we went to football. And that was just as much of a disaster. And then I played basketball. And I thought I was a great basketball player in grammar school. But the thing that was amazing, I wasn't very good. But the amazing part was that all that running around was keeping my lungs clear. And it wasn't something that we discovered or thought. It was just my dad wanted me to be with my brothers. And the ironic part of it all, so I went to high school and I thought I'm a basketball player, right? I tried out for the basketball team and the next day you show up and you look at the roster to see if you made the cutoff. And the first day, I kept looking at the list and I remember, there's other kids standing there looking. I said, I don't see my name up there. And, kids are awful. And one kid says, well, if you're not on the list, you didn't make the team, you've been cut. So I was cut. I didn't make the team. But again, in my mind's eye, I kept thinking, well, I'm an athlete. I play sports. Now, the most crazy thing is, so people that didn't make teams, they went to track and field, cross country, because they don't cut people. So of all things, here I am with cystic fibrosis. I was running cross country.
Wow.
It was great for me, great therapy. But I would run and I wasn't very good and I was slow, but the running, even in the actual, track meets, I'd be coughing, but, just spit up and clear my lungs. So it was really good for me. And from there, I went on to college and I was a pole vaulter and I pole vaulted in college. And the first time, like once I was diagnosed with CF that I really got sick was when I got out of college and I started working full time. And, you kind of give up a lot of your sports or you become that weekend warrior because I was focused on my career and I didn't have a balance. That was the first time I was really exposed to the world of CF and hospitalizations. And I remember going into the hospital to this day, and I was 21, maybe 22, and put in the room, and they didn't have, back then you had a little butterfly needle that would be put in your arm.
Wow. And
I remember the first night I was there, the thing kept hurting. And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe this is the way it is. Anyway, it infiltrated. They had to fix it. But I remember lying in bed in the room the first day. And again, you have to remember, this is my first experience, like hospitalization with CF. And people kept coming into my room and they would look at me and some would smile and wave and walk out the door. So at that morning, the doctor came in and I said, listen, I don't understand why these people keep coming in my room. He says, what do you mean? And I said, well, they're like these women, they must be 30, 35, 40, and some men, and they come in together. He goes, Jerry, those are parents of other people, their son or daughters in the hospital with CF. So I'm like, well, why are they coming in my room? He goes, well, they've never seen somebody as old as you with CF. How scary is that?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
their sons and daughters may have been, 5, 6, 8, 10, whatever. And there I was, 22. They'd never seen somebody. So that's why I say I grew up in the dark ages with CF. And that hospital, I mean, back then, it was free everything. We shared rooms, people with CF. They did postural drainage in the same room. It was one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Wow. So all that bacteria, all those germs, cross-contamination, crazy town.
Yeah, well, here I am today, though, so I don't know.
Right. That's true. Of course, you're still here, though. I mean, that's amazing. So then you're in fashion, right?
Yes.
Your career is fashion. Tell us how that goes, and then kind of when your lung transplant came up.
Yeah, so how it all went is I went in to the weirdest thing. So I grew up, I went to college, and I was certified to teach K through 12 and handicapped. My major was psychology and all of that stuff. And during my college career, for summer job, I was a waiter, and I started to do modeling and TV work, commercials. So I started to do all of that just as kind of fun to make money. And I did well. I mean, I started getting a lot of work. I did TV commercials, Coca-Cola and Burger King. But to me, it was all like funny money. So I would have, parties at school. I was in college. And the interesting thing, I'm telling you this because this is what leads into the apparel industry.
Mm-hmm.
Toward the end of that summer, I had an agent. And he said, well, we have to discuss this coming year. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I want to send you to soap operas. I want to send you to this and that and movies. He goes, so you have to transfer to Brooklyn College. And I looked at him and said, oh, I'm not doing that. I said, I got to go to college. I'm at University of Connecticut and I pole vault and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, you're making a big mistake. So I said, well, if you want me, I can come down. So what I did, I still was getting some work, but I wouldn't go on cattle calls, as they were called. I would be called in for like the final call. So if it was, they picked one or two people, but they liked me, but they didn't see me, they would call me in for that. So I did that throughout college and whatnot. And then what happened as I was graduating, my parents were like, there's no way, that's not a life, that's not a career, you can't rely on it. So that was not going to happen. And I decided, well, I didn't really want to teach because I got a taste of, making some money and that whole other world. So I went to, back then, I don't know if they even still have them, employment agencies.
Mm-hmm.
They saw that I modeled, which, but I didn't know the first thing about clothing or apparel or fashion. They sent me on some interviews for the apparel industry, fashion industry. So I ended up getting a job and I worked my way up through the ranks from a sales assistant to salesperson to sales management to VP of sales, managing organizations, traveling throughout the United States, traveling to Europe. But listen, cystic fibrosis is a progressive disease and it started to catch up with me. But I must tell you, as much as I'm out now with CF, nobody back then ever knew anything about it. I worked, I never told anybody. That's just the way it was. That was what I chose to do. I never told people I competed with in track and field. It was just my secret or my personal business, and nobody needed to know. And I didn't want anybody to look at me differently, to think, oh, well, yeah, he's sick, But it progressed, cystic fibrosis. And I remember once I got, this is kind of funny, I got a microbacteria at work and it was like TB. So when you get that, the Board of Health calls you right away. And this is a crazy story, but this is insanity of me. They call me up and they said, listen, you've been, diagnosed with blah, blah, blah. You need to tell your employer. I said, I'm not telling my employer. I said, don't bother me. And I hung up. But I didn't know they call the company, speak to the HR department, and I get a call from HR. And they call me down and listen, we got a call. We never knew that you had cystic fibrosis. I'm like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just, it doesn't affect me or whatever. And they're like, well, now you have this thing and we have to have a company meeting about this because, it could affect people and, people have to get a shot or something. Anyway, so I made it clear. Well, I didn't make it clear. So I was traveling when they had the meeting because I didn't have to be there.
Okay.
It was not something that they were going to say, Jerry has it. But this was my world. And I used to travel on IV antibiotics because once they let you out of the gate, that's how I felt I was free, where, there's home IV therapy. That was the worst thing in the world they could have done for me because I just started traveling, didn't bother me. I had those little bubbles, I called them bubbles, the intimates, traveling on and off planes. And, I would get in trouble because I'd call up, I'd be in North Carolina and my IV would infiltrate. So you have to call up and they've got to come over and I'd call up and I say, hi, it's infiltrated. And they'll say, okay, we'll be over now. I'm like, well, no, you have to call local place because I'm in Charlotte. So they used to go crazy.
Yeah.
But just to sum it all up. So yeah, it was progressive. I was getting sicker and sicker. My lung function, I should say, was dropping. And then it got to the point where the doctors, I was listed but not activated. And then they finally said, look, you have to stop working, you're getting worse. My lung function then was probably around 30. And I kept saying, no, I'm going to work a little more. I'm going to exercise more. And I did. I was involved in some drug studies that, helped out a bit. But it got to the point of, no return. So it was bittersweet when I had to stop working because I was in the process of being promoted to senior vice president. And I was called in and my boss made me fly in. I was at a trade show in Dallas. He says, just have your assistant work the show. You have to fly back right away. He didn't care about flight prices, anything.
Wow.
I flew back. I meet him at 7 a.m. He said that he was promoting me to senior vice president to oversee $120 million business. And I just turned in the middle of the conversation, said, oh, I can't take it. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, I just can't take the job because did you have another offer? And I'm like, no, I can't take it. I'm sick. And he was like, what do you mean you're sick? I'm like, I have to get a lung transplant. It was very ping pong match, back and forth conversation. But with that said, I stayed like 2 or 3 months, finished up all my work because I believe in completing everything at 100%. And then I went out on disability and it didn't happen right away. I figured, well, what am I going to do now? I can't sit around and stare at the walls and, you have to reinvent yourself in life.
And you were still in your 20s then?
No, you're talking, I was 40 something.
Oh, okay.
So, like I said, I worked for a long time, but, slowly, and I was exercising and coaching. Your lung function gets worse and the antibiotics don't work after a while. You become resistant. But I stopped working at around 49. I started volunteering because I ran into somebody. Because back then, when you enlisted for a transplant, they told you need to fundraise. So I did a fundraising event at the New York Athletic Club, and I ran into somebody that was on the board of the Boomer Esiason Foundation. And they were like, oh my God, look at you. Because they knew, Boomer and Gunner, they knew about CF. And they're like, you need to meet Boomer. But to me, it was like, whatever. Yeah, no big deal. I mean, I was just living my life. So I met Boomer. He said, listen, we'd love to have you do some work for us and volunteer work, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I had to still work for another month or two. And then when I stopped, I figured, well, I called him up and I spoke to a gentleman, Lee Becker, who was very helpful. And he got me started as a volunteer at the foundation. And Laura, I have to be honest, I didn't know the first thing about CF. I mean, I knew how to take care of myself, but I was never, ever connected to the CF community. I would go to the doctors back then, and back then when I went to the doctors, they didn't separate you like, okay, you come at 2 o'clock. So I would show up and people were lined up with CF. And I never associated with them. I always looked at it as like, oh, it's them and then it's me. Because, sadly, they were pretty sick, a lot of them. And I just was like horrified. So I never associated with it. So I started at the foundation.
I love your story, though. I love the whole way you do your life because you're just like, you make it all work. Like you make it look easy, even though I know it wasn't. You're like, oh, if this works, I'll try this. And of course, Lee Becker, we love Lee. And he's such a advocate for CF and Boomer's best friend and brilliantly brought you on board. I mean, thank goodness. So then you started working there. So yeah, pick it up from there.
Yeah. So I started volunteering at the foundation. It was bizarre. So I started to go online and seeing some of these things with CF, the breathing room and, a girl in a tub with all syringes. And it was like, to me, it was crazy. And then there was a gentleman here. He's still involved, Dave Remington, who is the president. And he got me involved because he was very tech savvy, involved in doing podcasts. I started doing podcasts. I created all these scholarship programs and transplant grant programs here. And I just, I took my knowledge from the apparel industry, how it's very creative, and I brought it to the foundation, and Boomer has been so supportive. And, he created like a safe haven for me because I still didn't have my transplant yet. Mm-hmm. And what do? You have a big job and career and you have to stop working because of your health. You have to reinvent yourself, but it's scary emotionally. It's a roller coaster ride. So, it's not about just, the physical. It's about the mental aspects. It's about your body, your mind, your spirit. And these are difficult things to overcome and move forward. And I think at times people think that, oh, he's not really sick or he's not this. But, I go through so much of the same stuff that anybody else does. I just like more life and I don't want to be sick. So I keep trying to live in the forward of possibilities, whatever they may be.
Absolutely.
And then I had to have a transplant, and my lung transplant was 11 years ago, and life was good again. And, I was still here at the foundation and whatnot. And the craziest thing, you trade one disease for the other. It's not a walk in the park. Had the transplant, but then I started having issues with sinuses. I've always had sinus issues. And their concern was that, oh, this is going to affect your new lungs. So I had the mutation. So I was able to start the CF modulator. Mm-hmm. I started CF modulators. They cleared up my sinuses. So I haven't had a surgery since. But, with transplant and CF, I started to have liver issues. And at one point they said, well, eventually you'll probably need a liver transplant. So I was like, yeah, whatever. Difficult. Let's just get it over with. But that was okay for a while. But I started to get sicker. with the liver, once your liver starts to go, I had starting to get bleeding issues. I was tired all the time. Just things weren't good. And the interesting part is we did an event. I did an event with my friend Emily Schaller.
Yay, Rock CF, yep.
Yeah, this Bike to Breathe. And the last one we did was when I was turning 65. And there's a song, Born to Be Alive. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the theme was Born to Be Alive at 65. So we did this biking, but at that point I was getting really sick with liver issues. And then the kidneys kicked in. This is during the ride. So I didn't ride very well. And I remember getting in and out of the van, the support vehicle. And I was like, oh God, this is difficult because I had gained all this water weight. To make a long story short, we finished the event early, but I was like obsessed. No, we have to do the event. We got to finish it. So we finished it and I said, just drop me off at the hospital. I thought I was going in for a couple of days just to get diuretics where they take care of, all the water weight I gained. I ended up going in. I spent my Born to Be Alive at 65 birthday in the hospital. But when your liver goes and your kidneys start to go, you get like delirious. And I remember what happened is one day then they said, oh, we're moving you. I'm like, where are you taking me? They said, oh, we're taking you to a different floor. But what happened is my kidneys were shutting down.
Okay.
I remember waking up 3 days later in intensive care on dialysis 24/7. And then the doctors came in and they were like, well, Mr. Cahill, now you need a kidney also. And then there was major discussions that they weren't going to do it. I was too sick. And I was in like a holding pattern until I got kind of stronger and had a little fever till that went away. Bottom line, thank God, they did decide to do the transplant after being in the hospital probably 3 weeks. But I was really sick. And with my liver, my MELD score was like 20, I think it was 21 or 3. But I was at like death's door. Really bad. They came in finally one morning and said, Mr. Cahill, we're going to activate you now for your liver and kidney. And I'm like, well, now what? They said, well, you're going to live in a hospital until you get that. It could be, a week, a month, 3 months. We don't know. Laura, I mean, there is a God and somebody is watching me. That afternoon, they came in and said, Mr. Cahill, we have a donor for you. And I was like, what? They're like, yes, you're going in for your liver and kidney transplant tonight.
Incredible.
So, yeah, it's been a long, long recovery, but here I am. I'm back.
You are, Arnold. I'm back, yeah. It's incredible. Your story is incredible. And I think when people meet you at our event, they'll definitely feel all the, really miraculous things that you've been through and still put out this beautiful light into our CF community and, keep everybody positive and you help so many people. We're excited for you to be able to meet all these other CF parents, a lot who are newly diagnosed with kids who are we have a bunch of people coming that have kids under 5.
Oh, wow. Great.
And older parents as well, or parents of, older kids like mine. So we have a nice mix, but it will really be inspirational to them. What do you hope, as we wrap up this podcast, what do you hope to how to connect with them? Like, what kinds of things will you be able to say to them to make them feel like there's hope?
I believe that seeing is believing. And, my story is a little wild and crazy, but you just have to have hope and believe. And your son or daughter, and, you can do anything just keep living in the forward and moving forward. I think that's important. Nothing should hold you back. Just be committed to living a great life.
And that's wonderful. And so you helped name, so Night of Hope Gala we already had, but then you're like, Diamonds in the Sky, Rihanna, and that song. And so we added that, and you're our little sunshine. So are you going to be wearing sparklies, or what are you going to do now? Diamonds?
I don't know. Now you're mentioning it, I guess I have to have some kind of sparkle somehow.
Yeah, I'm trying to get everybody to make sure that everybody has some sparkle somewhere, whether it's earrings, whatever makes you happy. Maybe you can put some glitter on your eyes or your eyebrows.
Oh, wow. We'll have to have somebody there with makeup for that.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to, speaking, but more importantly, to meeting people. I really like meeting people one-on-one and chatting with them. So it'll be great.
It will. It's going to be fantastic. And thanks so much for all your energy and support.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I know. Me too.
All right. Bye-bye.
If you're looking for a good party, an event where you can mix and mingle with kind people, join the Bonnell Foundation on Saturday, September 9th for the Night of Hope Diamonds in the Sky event. We're going to have fun and raise a lot of money for our programs. See the ticket link in show notes or on our website. We'll see you there. The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrating, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.